Chapter 50. Schedule, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 50. Schedule, Part 1/2. After all, there was the lesson to be learned from Yen Hong. Luo Nan had to consider the issue of plagiarism. In the end, the Wilderness Explorers Society was not the academic circle. Academic competition, contested ground, didn't seem to exist here. Instead, they cared more about practical results. The status of a psychic was exceedingly high without even taking into account the special circumstances of the present. As long as he stood his ground and displayed the functionality of his grandfather's results, no one would be able to strip away his grandfather's achievements. He considered things a few more times, but he still decided to place his trust with Octopus. He replied simply, "You can." Octopus burst into laughter on the spot. "Excellent. Then I will prepare the power of attorney form. The society uses a unified system, so we will need 2 people to act as notaries. Each of us will choose one person. Who will you choose?" "Your secretary." Luo Nan was finally completely at ease upon hearing Octopus take the initiative to say these words. He thought of He Yuan's personality. Indeed, she would make the best notary and would agree to it. The family had already boarded the car right now and the car drove off from the sanatorium. Luo Nan sat shotgun again and he turned his head to watch the setting sun gradually turn blood red amidst the large buildings. He was silent for a time. A moment passed before he requested something of Octopus. "My grandfather is there. I ask you to look after him." Octopus naturally pledged to Luo Nan. "Be at ease. I never knew that there was such a god next to me before. Now I know. From now on, he's my grandfather too. I will be sure to visit him morning and evening and attend to him properly." Cough. There's no need to follow my grandfather too closely with his current condition. Luo Nan was worried that Octopus was unable to think clearly, that Octopus would seize his grandfather as a treasure and interrogate him several times. "I understand. I understand. It would be bad to disturb grandfather with his current condition. Then how about you let me see grandfather's records post haste?" Octopus was currently in an extremely interested state. His thoughts were jumping around at lightning speeds. "Oh right. I heard you mention that grandfather also had a large portion of his records lost. This is easy to deal with. Let's issue a mission in the society later. We just need to set the reward to be very high. For example, 1 honor point for 1 notebook. Do you think even President Ouyang would mobilize? Don't be scared about not having enough points, I can split the cost. Just give me a complete copy of anything related to drugs and I will pay all the points, okay?" Luo Nan smiled from Octopus's passionate surge of details. But soon Luo Nan changed the topic to something else. "Oh right. Let me ask something else, bro Octopus. For an ability user, it doesn't matter how crazy one's self-logic is as long as their self-logic is complete and can be verified, right?" "Of course. Just look at those secret orders with their gods, holy sons and daughters, and first oblatums 1. Their mysterious and magical abilities are way too overpowered. They're unstoppable." Octopus has spoken all of this in a single breath, but he immediately felt that part of it was wrong, so he rushed with some additional words. What's more important than a complete logic is the verification. The verification. If you can't meddle with reality, then you're just psychotic, you just believe you can meddle with reality. Now that's a serious mental disorder. Oh, shoot. It looks like the things I just told you are things you find in the intermediate level seminars. This is beyond your scope. Don't let your imagination run wild. No wonder Octopus worked in the mental sanatorium, he was very keen towards these questions. He even worried that Luo Nan would let his imagination run wild without bound. Luo Nan being at a young age, and also being a psychic, made it so that misunderstandings could easily give rise to extremely serious issues. Luo Nan watched Octopus continue to give him advice and laughed. Relax, bro Octopus. I know. The most important task for me to do right now is to temper my body and achieve an equilibrium between my mental mind and fleshly body. Then through the dual channels of the mental mind and fleshly body, I shall slowly perceive this world to form and answer progressively. I shouldn't spend my time interpreting this world right. Good. Octopus didn't know that most of these words were pointers from He Yuan too. He immediately let out a breath of relief and greatly supported Luo Nan. Excellent. You have wits, kid. One should move steadily, one step at a time. Indeed, your body is lacking some polishing. But that doesn't matter. You're still growing, man. When the matter with the human-faced arachnid is over, I will give you a set of training methods for the mentally enhanced. You will certainly achieve equilibrium in just a few years' time before your body finishes maturing. You will become an awakened when that happens from relying on the foundation I lay for you. You should naturally find success like a canal that is formed when water flows. Oh right. I'll send you the study notes I took in the junior classes back in the day. You can refer to them for now. There are a lot of very fundamental things in them, but this information will still be useful even if you become an extraordinary. Luo Nan took a deep breath. Many thanks, bro Octopus. Luo Nan chatted a few more topics on fundamentals with Octopus before ending the call. Then he looked at the skies outside. The pitch blackness of night had already descended and the road lights to the two sides of the high-speed electromagnetic track were like two endless dragons of light. They extended dancing through the darkness. They seemed to merge together at the corners, but they would split apart in an instant. The dragons of light were harmonious and synchronous, yet they would find it hard to stay together forever. Luo Nan leaned against his chair. He stared absent-mindedly at the reflection of the two dragons of light. One dragon is Grandpa. One dragon is me. What? Mrs. Luo Shuqing, who sat in the back seat, was extremely sensitive to Luo Nan's soliloquy. Actually, Luo Nan had yet to speak a single word since getting on the car. He was silent for a long time, making Luo Shuqing be highly alert. Luo Nan looked back and saw that his aunt was obviously very nervous. He had to do his best to put on a calm expression. He thought for a bit. Then he spoke in a low voice. Auntie. Can you tell me something? Grandpa. How much time does he have left? Luo Shuqing's face was filled with shock in an instant. Then she used an even clearer frown to cover up her appearance. She suppressed her voice down to the softest whisper. What are you daydreaming about? Luo Nan let out a deep breath. 2 years. Don't be crazy. 1 year. Luo Nan. Luo Shuqing had suddenly raised her voice, causing Mo Peng besides her to freeze up. On the other hand, Uncle never looked back. It was as if he didn't hear anything all this time. He acted as the driver in form. Luo Nan let out a long breath to stabilize the sharp rush of emotions in his mind and to do his best to keep the tone of his voice steady. Grandpa sensed something about my drawing. What are you talking about? Luo Shuqing thought Luo Nan's train of thought was very bizarre. Luo Nan opened his notebook with a lowered head. He flipped to the page with the prison building and showed it to his aunt to see. Grandpa felt something about this drawing in the morning. Isn't that right, Brother Peng? Mo Peng's entire body felt uneasy when he heard Luo Nan take the initiative to call him brother. This must be a threat, but Mo Peng still nodded. Obviously the words, "It was none other than this drawing that made grandfather go crazy," had to be stuffed down to his stomach. Luo Shuqing took the notebook and saw the numerous and chaotic lines. She had formed a different meaning from these lines though, and her eyebrows furrowed tighter. She closed the book, not wishing to look at the drawing any longer in order to focus her thoughts. Be straightforward. What are your intentions when all is said and done? I want to draw a drawing that will make Grandpa truly happy when he sees it. I want to make him happy. This is not easy to do. I will need time, but I just don't know how much time he has left. Luo Nan turned his seat around to be facing Luo Shuqing directly. They crossed gazes. I need to plan a schedule, so I hope Auntie you will be able to give me accurate information to refer to. Can you do this for me? Do this for the eldest son of Luo Yuandao. 1. First Oblatum, literally head/chief sacrifice. I mistranslated this before as head Jai. I thought it was a name, but it's really a title. Oblatum is Latin for, to offer. The leader of the Order of Justice is known as the First Oblatum. Chapter 44.1, 2. He Yuan's pointers. He Yuan gave Luo Nan pointers on how he should proceed with his training in Chapter 46.1. Chapter 50. Schedule, Part February 2nd, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Luo Nan knew that although his aunt appeared powerful, she was very much a traditional woman. She put the importance of educating a child first. Her way of thinking was conservative. And she would often shift decisions towards the men of the family on certain principles and topics. Luo Nan was the sole heir of the Luo family. His aunt absolutely wouldn't be able to refuse just based on this fact alone. Luo Nan got what he wanted 2 minutes later. But now he didn't know what he should say to his aunt. He could only turn his chair around and the car sunk back into silence once again. Luo Nan used his flexible e.ink screen to thumb through his grandfather's diagnosis records. There wouldn't be any clear and timely conclusions in these records, but there would be hidden meanings between the words and lines. Luo Yuandao had multiple complications in functionality occur from the pathological changes in his nervous system. He had lost the functionality of several organs at the present, so he laid in an extremely dangerous state. In fact, he completely relied on drugs and medical devices to keep him alive. In the eyes of a doctor, it was already quite the miracle that this old man was now able to walk, able to speak, and able to get angry. There would ultimately be a day when the intense stimulation of drugs would no longer be capable of surmounting the essentials for life, the failed organs. Who knows when this man's scales of fate would start tilting? Perhaps all it would take was a slight increase in tolerance towards a certain drug, then the balance would be broken and everything would become irrevocable. Everything could be simplified into 3 words. At any time. Beyond all expectations, Luo Nan wasn't that shocked. It seemed that things ought to be this way. Some information came from the Hexaear once again, it was still Octopus. Octopus had sent Luo Nan the study notes he had taken back in the day. They were all on the junior level seminars he had participated in. He had written down the key information. Inside was a fundamental set of training theories for the realization and maintenance of equilibrium between mental mind and fleshly body. It was extremely typical and practical. Naturally, Octopus's intention of giving Luo Nan these notes was to give him some direction. Luo Nan skimmed through the writing, getting a general understanding of the notes as he flipped through its entirety. He saved these notes in the favorites folder within Hexaear for later use. His body leaned back against his seat and his gaze was cast outside at the 2 parallel dragons of light. The courses of these dragons of light were the same, but they would never be able to converge together. This was the way things must be under the rationality and rules of the normal world. If he were to draw something using the line of thinking of an ordinary person, his grandfather, a serious schizophrenic, would never be able to truly have the same interpretation towards the drawing. 5 years of time. Luo Nan had spent a lot of time trying to use the logic of normal people to decipher his grandfather's theories. He even tried explaining it to normal people. Even tried to convince them. But now he understood clearly. Grandfather's world of logic had completely departed from the dimension of normal people. What business did he have towards worldly reputation and justice? What grandfather needed, or at least what Luo Nan believed he needed, was a definite, an open, a proper, and an unmistaken interaction. Only then would everything begin. The most important thing was logic. Luo Yuandao's logic was classical. His formatting theory was similar in form to primitive philosophy. He advocated the nested rings of self-formatting, social formatting, and heaven-earth formatting. This type of nesting was not based on the external to the internal, the material to the mental, but rather the internal to the external, the expansion of the self towards the entire universe. It would be very hard for someone, aside from the founder, to like this sort of theory. This was because this theory took all existences besides I and pushed them in the whirlpool of life inside of me, turning them all into my servants. Luo Nan had followed the words of his grandfather for self-formatting. And when he explained social formatting, he had also used the 5-level structure of student, office worker, technician, clergy, and politician. He had understood it in a relatively impartial manner, intentionally or otherwise. But social formatting followed a formula that Luo Nan had yet to discover. It was not a clear cut model. The collective bodies of certain human societies. There were many social theories out there and the majority of them didn't differ in nature from social formatting. In fact, social formatting was even a bit inferior. It was just as Mo Peng, who possessed outstanding grades in all 7 subjects, had said. Where did the standard lie? Luo Nan had heard this answer clearly from the crazed roar of his grandfather. In me. The standard completely lies in me. My students, my office workers, my technicians, my clergies, my politicians. The selfishness and arrogance were enough to cause one to vomit. They were extreme and to the pinnacle, enough to make one quiver. But when Luo Nan eliminated those unnecessary emotions, he had found a complete and clear trail of logic to follow. Luo Nan flipped through his notebook until he reached the page with the prison drawing. He also flipped to the page that had given rise to the wraith sign. These were the 2 psychic drawings that were left on paper. Then he flipped back and opened the flexible e.ink screen to enter the interface of the drawing software. There should be one more psychic drawing here. The one he drew on the night of the 28th. The 3rd psychic drawing that was like a muddy river. But, it wasn't inside. He then pressed to enter the 2nd layer interface of the software. It was as if this place had truly been submerged in the muddy waters of a river. Then could he understand things to be like so? The psychic drawing was imported in this sort of way. Luo Nan naturally knew the symbolism behind the psychic drawing since he was the one who personally drew it. The muddy river waters were the turbid flow of emotions wielded by the human-faced arachnid, formed from the convergence of emotions of countless humans. It seemed that there was no one capable of breaking away from these dusky and muddy waters. And within this turbid flow, the human-faced arachnid engaged in its hunt. Luo Nan stared at the 5-layer pyramid-shaped structure. Humanoid sketches were densely packed inside. Although they were arranged neatly like playing cards, they were inexplicably hindrances to the eye. He trembled subconsciously for a moment like something was passing through a sieve. In an instant, the muddy flow of the interface turned even more muddy and turbid, as if it was being stirred by an enormous incorporeal hand. More importantly, the several hundred playing cards didn't follow the functions of the interface to get reshuffled. Instead, the cards scattered all around. The 1,000 of humanoid images were like passengers of a capsized boat drowning in the water. They poured out from the 5-level pyramid and they struggled, floated, and warped within the muddy waters. Luo Nan was undisturbed as he watched all this happen and he arrived at the appropriate conclusion. Everyone struggling within the turbid flow of emotions. A simple sketched portrayal is meaningless in regards to the social format. I believed I had to classify them into different categories, but actually this had no use at all. What is truly significant is. His gaze was cast at the main body of the 5-level pyramid. It had already turned completely empty. No. There were exceptions. At the lowest level, student, there were 2. Luo Nan's memories ran rather deep for one of them. It was the gift he had drawn not even 2 days ago. A certain man was brandishing with one arm and was holding onto someone's shoulder with the other. He seemed deranged but was also upright and unafraid. It was Xie Junping under an extreme state one. The other was a fish. It looked to be very lively. It swam in circles within the muddy waters, but from start to end, it never surpassed the range of the student level. He stared fixed at the outline of this fish, which looked to be drawn in a casual manner. Luo Nan used his finger to trace 2 lines before confirming its history. Within the third psychic drawing was the portraying of several ability users as fish. The corresponding target was cat eyes. This was not the end. Looking up from the student level, crossing over the completely empty office worker level, and into the technician level, Luo Nan could clearly see a bizarre symbol floating in space. The Wraith sign. Human-faced arachnid. 1. Luo Nan's drawing of Xie Junping. In Chapter 33.1, Luo Nan drew a picture of Xie Junping as a gift portraying the moment when Xie Junping was defending Luo Nan against the lawyer of a new investor. Chapter 51. Entering the Wrong Door, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 51. Entering the Wrong Door, Part 1/2, Luo Nan sat quietly in his seat as he stared at the nearly empty 5-level pyramid. He continued to deduce some conclusions. It is the same pyramid, but the contents that remain inside is as different as night and day. It should be because the standard is completely different. The stratification I had early before was a simple reproduction of the structure of society, anyone could be arranged within it. But this sort of structure didn't have a clear cut and accurate position for each individual. It's like a mass of parts piled together. No matter how much I demanded its completion, it wouldn't be assembled into a complete and functional machine. It was meaningless. Today's stratification has a simple and crude standard. Whether or not it belongs to me. Under this simple logic, all existences that are unrelated to me are wiped away. As for what's the criteria for being related? Obviously one must have a direct relationship with my self-formatting in order to be brought into this system. As layers and layers of logic propelled his thoughts forward, the software interface continued to change. The heavily chained crow was like a giant python that moved about inside and outside the 5-level pyramid structure. But no matter how it moved, it maintained connections with Xie Junping, cat eyes, and the wraith sign inside the structure. The heavily chained crow symbolized my heart's a prison. The concretization of the self-format. Luo Nan had used the heavily chained crow to annihilate a clone of the human-faced arachnid on Xie Junping. Cat Eyes had suffered the countermeasures of the heavily chained crow when she had impinged upon Luo Nan during his divination with the psychic drawing. As for the wraith sign, it had been under the heavily chained crow's control from beginning to end. These scenes flashed one by one in Luo Nan's mind, and he made a footnote from his reasoned conclusions. Of course, differences existed between these 3. These differences were reflected in how they were partitioned between these levels. Xie Junping and Cat Eyes were in the student level. According to formatting theory, they did not contribute to the social format. Instead, they were learners who received teachings in a unidirectional manner. Even though Xie Junping had gotten Luo Nan out of a predicament emphatically, even though Cat Eyes released her deep memories for Luo Nan, these only happened after they entered the formatting system. Their inclinations were undergoing changes. From merely at the system level, Luo Nan was completely unable to obtain any direct benefits from these 2. And if a major stimulation would occur, they may likely refuse Luo Nan's teachings and walk out of the pyramid, parting ways with Luo Nan. The wraith sign, however, was absolutely Luo Nan's dog. It'll bite whoever Luo Nan wants it to bite. Its loyalty was off the charts and it possessed extremely powerful capabilities. More importantly, Luo Nan could obtain direct benefits from it. The benefits he could get were even higher than simply relying on training his body. The gains from consuming the human-faced arachnid's clones were already proof of this. And so, the Wraith sign had entered the technician level. But the problem was that it wasn't self-aware. It was impossible for it to ascend to a conscious state. It had already reached its highest level. His deep thoughts arrived at this point. Suddenly, Luo Nan inexplicably felt a feeling of familiarity. The levels became clear to him. The progressively deepening links and feedback patterns. Where had he seen this before? He traced back his memories in a single direction and found the relevant scene, the frozen frame of grandfather roaring fiercely. Luo Nan pressed against his forehead, digging with his fingers. Then certain words suddenly smashed into his brain, lingering around and difficult to be dispelled. Shrine. Holy nation. New God. Old God. 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 Within the crazed speech of his grandfather, the frequency of words related to God was extremely high. And these words were held in core positions of the speech. If it was the past, Luo Nan wouldn't pay attention to this. But now his scope was broadened wide. It would be hard for his thought process to remain simple. He closed his eyes, connecting into the psychic wave network via the hexaear and entering into the interface of the professional society. Then he searched for the item, Secret Order, to look up relevant information on the structure of these organizations. Soon, a large quantity of information surged forth. It seemed that the filtering function of the AI installed in the society's psychic wave network wasn't that impressive. Luo Nan could only search and comb through the data with difficulty until he found this sole section that drew his attention. The overwhelming majority of secret order founders have been unavoidably influenced by current existing social culture. In the beginning, they often refer to ancient myths, mainstream religions, and historical legends to build the basic structure of their sections. They even model things off of novels and games, smearing their sects with various fantastical flavors, yet they set up strict rankings. The concrete ideas are myriad in diversity. Let's refer to the secret orders that have existed for at least 10 years. One must admit that a convergence in nature has appeared in a very large degree, a degree so large that it's shocking. Most notably is the structure of these organizations. The three major world secret orders all practically agree by chance to divide their internal members into 4 rankings. They may call these rankings by different names, but the implications of each are very similar. I will take all these secret orders and explain it as a unified whole. Shallow believer, devoted believer, mad believer, favored. As the name implies, the cultists of the 4 levels have different degrees of devotion and dedication towards their gods, and there are also differences in the favors and awards given by their gods. The facts can be verified. These gods, these first oblatums, have real and true offerings, demands, and feedback from each and every ranked disciple that are strictly determined by ranking. These organizations possess similar but strict and feasible logic to form systems that are stable even until today. Luo Nan only read half of it, but he already felt that this article matched really well with his ideas. It answered his questions precisely, so Luo Nan took care to look at the author's name. He never thought that it would be a familiar one. Bamboo Pole. In case this wasn't known before, this was the skinny and tall person that was in charge of the intelligence work on the night of the 28th. Luo Nan remembered that this person was all smiles, but his words were actually quite sharp. Luo Nan's impression deepened, for this person's explanation corresponded with his own situation. Now he finally understood where the familiar feeling came from. The 4-rank structure of secret orders. Its definitions can certainly be borrowed from some novel or some game, but it seemed to be completely comparable with the pyramid structure. Even though the pyramid structure had 5 levels, the topmost politician level's definition was fairly special. It represented the subversion and negation of the entire format. It didn't need to be discussed for now. The lower 4 levels were highly reasonable matches. Looking at his grandfather's formatting theory, or at least the social format level, from this perspective, wouldn't this be an explained ability system and wouldn't it be slanted more towards the standpoints of secret orders? Then what was he now? A poorly developed god. Luo Nan rubbed his forehead with greater force. Tired. We're almost home. His uncle suddenly spoke. Luo Nan went, jumping out of his state of reflection. It seemed like his behavior just now made his uncle and aunt worry. He thought for a bit, then smirked lightly. I'm not tired. I'm just a bit hungry. His uncle went, and he turned around to talk to his aunt. It'll be late to make dinner when we get back. Do you want to let old Mo make a nutritious meal, or shall we get by with something outside? Mo Peng shouted with fright. God! Don't let that old man work. Chapter 51. Entering the Wrong Door, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Old Mo was the family's AI housekeeper. When they had purchased this AI, they had accidentally chosen the environmentally friendly green option. The cooking menu of this artificial intelligence would forever be filled with low-fat and high-protein options. And the healthy meals it would make tasted more like drugs than food. Being middle-aged, Luo Nan's aunt and uncle would occasionally try it when they were too lazy to cook, they were indifferent to it. But from Mo Peng's perspective, he would rather drink boiled water. Luo Nan felt the same way, but he had exhausted a great amount of mental energy, so it would still be best to replenish himself with a healthy meal. Uncle saw the horrible expressions on these two youngsters' faces and was willing to concede. Then let's go out. There's a new restaurant nearby that's pretty decent. He then used the car's AI to book a meal online. Their luck was pretty good. He was able to place an order even though they had entered the bustling market district of Xia City and it was dinner time. The SUV cut into a different lane, entering the bypass light rails of a skyscraper, gradually leaving the layer of traffic. Xia City extended from the ground to the high skies with its 20 layers of traffic. The top 5 layers were dedicated for aviation, the other 15 layers of traffic mostly passed through the bypass light rails of various skyscrapers, allowing to switch and bypass into different layers. Every night, many of the large skyscrapers would light up and look like spiraling revolving neon lanterns. Thousands upon thousands of flying cars shuttled crisscrossed between each other to form rivers of light that seemed to flow for eternity. It was filled with a beauty of social order. Luo Nan just so happened to see this phrase, social order, appear in Bamboo Pole's writing. We observe the appearance of irrational indicators in the majority of secret orders, but a high degree of unity and social order ultimately appear in and amongst every order. It makes one skeptical how everything irrational is stuffed into a hard, firm, and strict framework. Perhaps it's some sort of miraculous machine that pumps out orderly products when stuffed with irrational materials. I have been unable to find an explanation that fits this besides that this is a complete ability explanation system. We can match the 4 rankings of orders to the ability explanation system within the society. The shallow believer corresponds with the unawakened ability user. The devoted believe corresponds with the awakened. The mad believer corresponds with the undertaker. The favored corresponds with the extraordinary. Basically the rankings match up quite well. Is the ability explanation system just another means to achieve the same end? If this is true, the society is quite willing to sit down and have breakfast together with the secret orders. But in reality, there exists a serious divergence between the societies and the secret orders explanation system. The society, orders, and there are even burners. What does this mean for so many different systems to exist simultaneously? We've only seen one side to this truth. Could it be that this world is like a sandwich? Or is it like a multi-layered crepe? Removing one layer reveals another. It just depends on how you eat it. Bamboo Pole's article was quite long, so Luo Nan only read for an approximate understanding of it. Still, it was quite clear what was Bamboo Pole's purpose for writing this paper. He wanted to discuss the opposing systems between the society and secret orders while correcting preconceptions of scorn. Anyway, Luo Nan's feelings departed a bit from Bamboo Pole's desired objective. It seemed I entered the wrong door. Luo Nan had a certain tiny ridiculous thought. Now it looked like his formatting theory leaned more toward secret orders. For instance, weren't Xie Junping and Cat Eyes shallow believers? And it wouldn't be a problem to say that the Wraith sign was a mad believer. The standard of the social format was more like a typical god serving as the core for the constructed system of a secret order. If these facts were true, then his self-logic would be a serious deviation from the ability explanation system advocated by the society. So what was the point of entering the society? Of course, what Luo Nan really wanted to know was why did his grandfather's theory matched so closely with the secret order systems? Was it a coincidence? Or was there a different reason? Luo Nan doubted that he would receive an answer soon. The family had already arrived at the restaurant. A server guided them to their booked table and they sat down. The atmosphere of the restaurant was quite decent. Pseudo-classical wooden shutters let rays of light shine through and also focused on privacy. It was relatively peaceful, even though there was a decent amount of people. Luo Shuqing was very much satisfied. You chose a nice place. For youngsters, this kind of atmosphere was a bit old-fashioned. Mo Peng was not interested in the surroundings, he just lowered his head to play games after ordering his meal. Luo Nan went to the restroom. His thoughts had reached a roadblock, he couldn't avoid the matters that weighed heavily on his mind. He went all the way with his head down, paying no attention at all to the matters in his surroundings. But someone called out to him while he was washing his hands. Mr. Luo. Luo Nan was startled for a bit, then he raised his head to see a 40-year-old man with a tall and big body. He looked to be lean and calm. Luo Nan felt only that this person was familiar. He had to think about how this man had called out to him before realizing that only those who had participated in the operation on 28th had called him by Mr. Luo. Yes. This was one of the 4 bodyguards that Yuan brought with her. He was in charge of looking over Shuelei, the Black Wolf, and other wounded people. He was a very steady man. However, Luo Nan was unable to recall this person's name no matter how hard he tried. He was a bit embarrassed. This bodyguard was quite sophisticated. He laughed and extended out with his hand in response, introducing himself again. Zhou Hu won. I didn't greet Mr. Luo that day. Apologies. Luo Nan rushed with a brother Zhou, and spoke somewhat baffled. Brother Zhou, since you're here, is Sister He here too? Nope. I'm off today. I came here for a private dinner. My old team of combat buddies. Oh right. Crag Burst is here too. Ha. Luo Nan had a much deeper impression towards Crag Burst, a fellow society member. This valiant close-combat expert acted as his protector during the operation. Though he didn't encounter a chance to display his skills, that 2-meter-tall buff giant gave off quite the feeling of safety. Luo Nan had even added him as a friend using the hexear. Your combat buddy. We saw each other before, but we weren't deep friends. However, now we're familiar with each other. Zhou Hu laughed and invited Luo Nan, Mr. Luo, come over and join us. Not this time. Tell Crag Burst I wish him well. Luo Nan was not good at these sorts of exchanges. He said these words and was just about to leave when he turned his head and saw Mo Peng's short and stout body make his way inside. Mo Peng was shocked for a moment when he saw Luo Nan clearly chatting with this middle-aged and large man. However, he didn't think much about it. He called out to them and then went to relieve himself. It would be awkward for Luo Nan to leave now. He faced Zhou Hu with a laugh. That's my older cousin. Zhou Hu understood, leaving first with goodbyes. As soon as he left, Mo Peng came next to Luo Nan to wash his hands. He spoke through grimaced teeth. You met someone you knew. Dad did too. This place is evil. He hadn't finished speaking his words when someone else came in. Luo Nan was standing with his back faced against the door at this time. That person saw Luo Nan from behind straight on, as well as the side of Luo Nan's face in the mirror, and that person suddenly trembled, turned around, and walked out. Mo Peng just felt that things were really weird. We're all guys here. Can he still say he went in the wrong door? 1. Zhou Hu, literally Zhou Tiger. Chapter 52. Yan Yonghua, Part 1/2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. As Mo Peng's voice faded away, the person who had just left came charging back in a hurry. He made his way inside with a lowered head. It seemed like he couldn't hold on any longer. Mo Peng felt that this person was absolutely weird, so he started laughing. Luo Nan had the vague sensation that he was the reason for this person's bizarre behavior. He swept a glance at this person's face and saw that he was quite young. He wore old-fashioned gold glasses and looked to be like Bro Octopus at first glance. However, this person had shiny hair and smooth skin, looking to be a bit effeminate. He looked familiar, but Luo Nan was unable to recognize him. In any case, it would be bad to block someone off at the urinal to interrogate them. Luo Nan could only keep this person in the back of his mind as he and Mo Peng exited the restroom. They continued their conversation in a smooth manner. Who's the person Uncle met? Was he from work? He looks like a rich person. He brought a bodyguard and a lawyer. Seems like he came to talk business. He looks to be quite young. Mo Peng could only recall this much. The two strolled down the hallway at a pace that was not urgent nor slow. Then footsteps rang out from behind them. The young door man had just left the restroom and was walking in the same direction as them, but he ended up going into a different room midway. The distance was just right. Luo Nan released his mental senses to see what was going on inside the room. Right when he was sizing up each person's face, a sentence struck his ear. This place is evil. We talked about him and now he's here. Who? The one we were just talking about. The one who nearly choked Li Shuecheng to death, and who entered into the order club. Oh dang. That nut job. Luo Nan couldn't refrain from touching his face. Luo Nan had already advanced past the range of his senses after hearing the last sentence, but it should be fine even if he didn't hear the rest of it. He finally recalled who that spectacled male was. He was one of Xie Juanping's good-for-nothing friend. His name was probably Lu Tao too. He was the one who initially described the Darksider life form. Luo Nan was quite familiar with 2-3 people within the room. He should have met them all face to face on the warship, and they're probably the small group of rich kids. Luo Nan just didn't expect that he would become a bit famous within that circle. Even if it was infamy. He no longer paid attention to these people, and he entered the large hall with Mo Peng. Dialogue still continued on within the room. While it was true that they were the circle of rich kids, a more accurate description would be that they made up most of the key members of the construction society. They were only missing Li Shuecheng, who was resting in the hospital. They were supposed to be having dinner with the manager of their company financer, the Rainbow Fund 3. But the manager was running late, so they had yet to start dinner. They were bearing it with pain, so all they could do was to shoot off gossip to keep things alive. This kid's relationship with Xie Junping is not clear at all. I heard that Li Shuecheng called the Broken Souls group to gang up on him the day after 4. Not only was he unsuccessful, he was also sent to the hospital by Xie Junping 5. I think you have it wrong. How come I heard that this matter had something to do with Lien Jieyu? Have you seen Xie Junping and Lien Jieyu hang out together in the past 2 days? It seems like that relationship is already over. Then the host Lang Ding 6 stood up at this time. I just got in contact with him. He's outside. I'll go out to welcome him. Lu Tao stirred out with a problem. His happiness soon died down a bit. This kid is quite the big shot. We don't even know his name or what he looks like even up until now. It's alright as long as he knows the procedure behind the Rainbow Fund's official seal. Lang Ding laughed and called a few people to go with him. They headed to the large hall. Luo Nan and Mo Peng had already entered the large hall at this time. He saw the four-person table that his family had booked in the far distance. It was actually full and there was even one more person standing up. Mo Peng rolled his eyes upon seeing this. They're still not done chatting. They can't be joining us for dinner, right? Luo Nan walked closer and the pseudo-classical shutters no longer blocked his view. His foot suddenly trembled as the appearance of the person standing outside entered his eye. The person standing was swift and fierce. His skin was dark and shiny. His ice-cold gaze swept in his surroundings in vigilance. He had the appearance of a bodyguard. When Luo Nan's gaze swept across, the dark-skinned bodyguard reacted at the same time, casting his deep and cold gaze over. It was that dark-skinned man he saw at Gear. The Burner 7. Luo Nan's eyebrows creased slightly. His pace paused a bit, then he increased in speed as he walked directly over. He saw who the other two people besides his aunt and uncle were sitting down. One was the lawyer he had seen on that day. Another was a man who looked to be around 30 years old. He had a handsome appearance and seemed to be laughing, but the creases on his face made it obvious that he maintained a serious expression all year round, causing his smile to appear stiff and distorted. He also gave off a bit of an inexplicable cold air. But what gave one the deepest impression was located near the rim of this man's eyes. It was an abnormal appearance of the color of blood entwining with tendons and muscles. It made a stark and demonic contrast with his smile. That's right. This man's eyes were crimson red. As the distance drew closer, Luo Nan drew a step closer to confirming that the atmosphere in the booth was absolutely abnormal. Uncle's expression was calm and Aunt's expression was as deep as water. Neither spoke a word, there was no trace of happiness of a reunion between old friends. That red-eyed man was also silent. The voice that came out of the booth was the elitist accent of Lawyer Zhu. I am temporarily unable to explain the intentions behind Mr. Yan's last-minute proposal to transfer. However, with my professional foresight, I believe that there are many mechanisms at play. Luo Nan and Mo Peng already walked right outside the booth at this time. The dark-skinned bodyguard had stared at Luo Nan all this time. Luo Nan didn't feel much from this openly cold gaze, but Mo Peng could no longer take it. I say that there's something wrong with this atmosphere. The red-eyed male saw them at this time. He waved his hand, indicating to Lawyer Zhu to stop. His gaze turned and fell directly onto Luo Nan's face. He paused a bit but took the initiative to stand up and crack a smile. This smile was extremely grotesque. His lips were opened wide and the two corners of his mouth were deliberately tightened up to affect the muscles of his cheeks. His eyes didn't squint from this smile but instead enlarged. The crimson-red corner of his eyes trembled slightly. That bizarre distorting of his face was indescribable. This must be Luo Nan. I remember the last time I met you, you just came out of the womb 8. You weren't even as big as a hand. And so you've grown up. Yan Yonghua 9. Luo Shuqing had slammed the table with a bang. Her voice had never been this furious and intense. The entire restaurant went quiet. The customers further away all turned their heads around to look. The server made his way over in a hurry, wishing to find out what was going on. And this also drew the attention of Lang Ding's group, who had just entered the large hall and were looking around. They first saw the familiar dark-skinned bodyguard without noticing anything else. Hey! They're here. The group came over with their curiosity. Lang Ding, who led the way, first saw the situation within the booth. His gaze flitted across from Luo Nan's face and fell onto the red-eyed man's face. His expression changed colors in an instant. He cried. Yen! Professor Yen! The members of the Construction Society's committee followed behind him. Some were at a loss, some were stupefied. But all those who were able to recognize this face had this thought run secretly in their mind. This financial backer. His schemes run so deep. 1. Li Xuecheng, literally Li excelled at learning, being choked. Luo Nan sent Li Xuecheng a hypnotic suggestion to stop breathing when Li Xuecheng had destroyed his flexible e.ink screen on the warship in Chapter 9.2. 2. Lu Tao, literally Lu Pottery. Lu Tao was introduced in Chapter 13.1 and was an exposition tool to describe the Darksider life form. 3. The Construction Society getting the financial backing of the Rainbow Fund. The Construction Society and the Mystic Arts Research Society are the two major societies bidding for the assets of the Order Club. The Construction Society received the financial backing of the Rainbow Fund, which will tilt the scales more towards them. Described in Chapter 32.1. 4. Li Xuecheng's attempted revenge. Li Xuecheng hired a group of thugs to go beat up Luo Nan, streaming it live after he kidnapped Lian Yu, Chapter 19.2, to watch the result together. Luo Nan gets saved by a mysterious person who runs off chasing the thugs, Chapter 20.1.2. Luo Nan he meets this person, Xue Lei, later on, and they become friends. 5. Xie Junping, literally Xie handsome peaceful, sending Li Xuecheng to the hospital. Xie Junping rescues Lian Yu and beats up Li Xuecheng in Chapter 20.2. 6. Lang Ding, literally Lang Cauldron. Lang Ding is the chairman of the Construction Society and was introduced in Chapter 32. 1. 7. Dark-skinned man, aka He Lianpi, literally, dark/hay-skinned face. Luo Nan encountered this burner the first time back on the warship, Chapter 16.1. Luo Nan meets this person again at Gear in Chapter 32.1 with the lawyer of the Rainbow Fund. His full name was given in that chapter. He was first mentioned in the story as Old He in Chapter 12.2 and was seen working under Yan Yongbua on the warship. 8. Luo Nan, literally Luo South, coming out of the womb. In Chapter 31.2, Luo Nan describes how his mother had suffered a fatal injury in his grandfather's laboratory out in the wilderness due to some sort of attack/chaos that happened. She removed Luo Nan from her womb and placed him in a life-sustainment pod to save him. The fact that Yan Yongbua was there to witness this implies that he was involved with the chaos that happened in the lab. 9. Yan Yongbua, literally Yan always rich. Yan Yongbua was first introduced at the end of Chapter 11.1. He is the son of Yan Hong and was also a professor at Acumen College like his father. He voluntarily retired in the year 2090 for some unknown reason. He is also the burner from Quantum Corporation who assisted He Yueyin in killing the burning wraith on the warship. Chapter 52. Yan Yongbua, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Most of the key members of the Construction Society have been at Acumen College for over 10 years. Yan Hong's academic scandal happened 6 years ago, sending waves of shock in the entire world. These key members certainly hadn't forgotten the causes behind this. And most of all, wasn't Gear none other than the topic they're focused on right now. The scene of the academic scandal, which made the world go in an uproar, centered on the accident that happened in the underground laboratory of Gear. Yan Hong deliberately manufactured an accident while faced with the accusations of the entire world. He destroyed the evidence in the crudest way, covering up his crimes and painting Acumen College, which had the administrative duty, in a dark light. Yan Hong disappeared without a trace with the fingers of countless people pointing at him. And Yan Yongbua, who served as a professor at Acumen College, also disappeared. The absolute majority of people felt that these two would never be seen again. But now they were here like a fierce slap to the face. It really is Yan Yongbua. He taught a class I took before. Lu Tao recognized Yan Yonghua and could not hold back from poking one of his companions in the side. Hey! Is he the one in charge of the Rainbow Fund? They have a credit limit of over 10 billion. It seems he's being backed by Quantum Corporation. Is Yan Hong going to make a killer comeback? The fellow shook his head. He had nothing. He was unable to answer this question. Yan Yonghua's devilish crimson pupils swept across Lang Ding's and the others' faces. He gave a slight nod, this was his greeting. Then he turned his gaze to the furious Luo Shuqing, giving a slight bow. Apologies Mrs. Luo. My words have been inappropriate. Actually, I've quite admired, respected Senior Qingwen. So the first thing I've decided to do upon returning is to purchase gear, the immortal work designed by Senior Qingwen back in those days. Those days. I also hope to restore glory to my dear father's laboratory. Luo Shiqing did not hide her emotions at all. What wishful thinking. Yan Yonghua was not rash nor impatient. He raised his hand and tapped his temples. Right now, I have the ability to turn this dream into reality. Oh, how embarrassing. I forgot that you all haven't eaten yet. I won't disturb you for now. We can talk about the matter of the transfer in the future. He walked directly out of the booth and Lawyer Zhu rushed to follow behind. Luo Nan stared cold-fixed at this strange man from outside the booth. At first, he didn't know who Yan Yonghua was, but now it was clear. He was that person. Yan Hong's son. The word feud would not be enough to describe it. And it didn't matter which side it was, none had any intentions of dissolving their hatred. Yan Yonghua walked to the side of Luo Nan, seeming to just brush past him. Yet he suddenly twisted his head and faced Luo Nan's cold and clear eyes with that warped smile. Oh, yeah. My father and Mr. Luo Yuandao have worked together for several years, and I have worked with Mr. Luo for a period of time as a student and a research assistant. We were all schoolmates of Acumen College, Senior Zhongheng, Senior Qingwen, and I. If there's the chance for us to coexist, I hope that we will be able to continue the fate between our two families in gear. Luo Nan was disinclined to respond to these meaningless words. But Yan Yonghua suddenly turned around without any warning in the next moment. He raised his hand and pressed onto Luo Nan's shoulder. He looked to be acting intimate, but then he bent slightly and pulled with force, forcing Luo Nan down to him. His mouth stuck to Luo Nan's ear and he whispered with laughter. I exaggerated a bit just now. You weren't that small when you were contained in the womb. At worst you were the size of a chihuahua. You were quite cute floating around in the solution. Feeling Luo Nan's body instantly turn rigid, Yan Yonghua patted his shoulder. What a pity about Senior Qingwen. Ever since middle school, I had her as my dream girlfriend. But ever since that happened, this became an impossibility. Do you know why? Luo Nan turned his face slightly with a penetrating gaze that was cold to the point of congealing. But this had no effect whatsoever towards the warped smile on Yan Yonghua's face. It's too easy for me to make mental associations. As soon as her face flashes in my mind, I remember her pile of rotted flesh and bones. Some string snapped within Luo Nan's mind in this instant. The heavily chained crow wished to pierce out of his body amidst a crackling vibration to pierce through the skull of the man in front. But a scorching force of fire came first out of Yan Yonghua's body. It penetrated into Luo Nan's reined neck like a red-hot blade cutting everything in its path. Luo Nan's thoughts froze in this moment's brush with death. The heavily chained crow didn't come out, and the words of Yan Yonghua pounded into his eardrum one by one. Look. This is none other than the archetype format. This is what it means to be a burner. These are true results. And what you all have is worthless. These are the words that I wasn't able to tell your damned father back in the day. I now give them to you. Yan Yonghua released Luo Nan's shoulder and laughed just like that at the top of his lungs. He just left. The dark-skinned bodyguard followed closely behind and Lawyer Zhu rushed to catch up. Lan Ding and the other key members of the construction society looked at each other in dismay. They hesitated for quite a while before chasing behind Yan Yonghua. Yan Yonghua was like a crazed demon. He kept on laughing with a laughter that was hoarse and piercing. It resounded within the large hall. Nan Nan. Luo Shuqing, who had been terrified by an inexplicable force, finally struggled to. She climbed over the chair and tossed herself over. She hugged at the kneeling Luo Nan and spoke incoherently. "Are you okay? What did he say? That bastard. What's the matter? What did he say?" Luo Nan spoke not a word. Yan Yonghua walked ahead with a brisk pace, pulling some distance between him and the members of the construction society. Eventually, he ended his laughter, and his face soon returned to its normally cold and solemn state. Lawyer Zhu. Lawyer Zhu had to jog in order to catch up to him. His elitist easy-going air had unavoidably become a bit broken. But it would be bad if he didn't run. He was quite scared from Yan Yonghua's previous display. He never thought this large financial backer, who always had a calm appearance, would actually be a madman at his core. He asked with small pants. "Mr. Yen. Do you, sir, have any instructions for me? How's the situation with the school?" This sudden change in the topic made Lawyer Zhu stupefied. Luckily this field was his specialty, so he was able to answer Yan Yanbo quickly. Basically they agree to speed up the process. If the bidding goes smoothly. Why wouldn't it go smoothly? Ha! You have the complete support of the Rainbow Fund. Come on Lawyer Zhu. Tell me, where's the hitch? Lawyer Zhu felt his knees grow a bit weak. He subconsciously choked on saliva as he rushed to patch things. All relevant procedures will be completed within half a month of a successful win in the auction. Are there hindrances? It mainly has to do with those still in the club. The one just now. I'm talking about Luo Nan. Lawyer Zhu shot a glance at Yan Yonghua's face as he spoke. He only continued after seeing that there wasn't any particular reaction. Luo Nan is now a member of the club. He doesn't have the authority to make decisions, but he has the authority to apply for reconsiderations. In other words, he can use some doubtful procedural grounds to drag the time out. Of course, this won't hinder present conditions. We can handle things simultaneously. Ah! Yan Yonghua had suddenly turned around and grabbed Lawyer Zhu by the collar, glaring at him. Lawyer Zhu, do you know what the present conditions are? Lawyer Zhu was scared stupid. He shook his head intensely. Do you know how many earthquakes have happened in the past 10 days in Xia City? He continued shaking his head. 15 times. You don't even know this, and yet you dare to talk about the present conditions. Lawyer Zhu was already made completely stupid by Yan Yonghua's logic. Fortunately, Yan Yonghua released his hands at this time, letting out a sigh. Apologies. My brain was a bit excited. Help me think of how to handle things right now. Right now my mind is full of kill kill kill. This isn't too good, right? Chapter 53. Hunter, Part 1 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Since Lawyer Zhu and Yan Yonghua stayed behind, Lang Ding and the others were able to catch up. Yan Yonghua did not acknowledge them. Instead, he used glared Lawyer Zhu fixed in place with his serious eyes, hoping to receive an answer. Lawyer Zhu's knees were really growing weak now. His heart was already captured by the exploding emotions of regret and fear. He was able to confirm now more than any other time that this fellow Yan Yonghua was not a normal person down to the bone. Yan Yonghua was abnormal. Lawyer Zhu was willing to admit that he himself was extremely ordinary. How could Yan Yonghua say something like, kill kill kill, in front of others? He wanted to block up Yan Yonghua's mouth right now, to prevent him from spitting out those murderous words. He did his utmost to suppress his mind for the sake of this, striving to cook up words. Mr. Yen. Maybe we can change one of our methods. If we want to prevent him from using his authority of reconsideration, it would be best to terminate his identity as a member of the club. Yes. I know this is not possible, but there are a substitute means. Yes. There are other means. A person's potential was unlimited under pressure. A whole new idea really did pop up in Lawyer Zhu's mind. Yes. We can let him step back. We just need to prove that Luo Nan has some kind of direct relational interests to gain with the auction. Then we just need a single hearing in order to shut him up forever. Lang Ding and the others had already surrounded them at this time, taking up the majority of the corridor. They wanted to call out, but Yan Yongbo wouldn't even look them in the eyes. Instead, he had quite a bit of interest in Lawyer Zhu's words. He asked. Relational interests. For example. We can question if Luo Nan has some secret agreement with the Mystic Arts Research Society. After all, the timing of him entering the club was too much of a coincidence. We can certainly make an issue about this. Yan Yonghua nodded slightly. Excellent. But where's the evidence? No, Mr. Yen. This was just an example. Lawyer Zhu was within his field of expertise, allowing him to finally regain his confidence. His voice grew a bit louder. We can take a more proactive approach. Your intent to transfer you just mentioned, now that's an excellent entrance point. I don't quite understand the circumstances behind it. It seems like it's related to some patents. Yan Yonghua's expression didn't change. He gave a slight nod. More or less. Luo Nan's a direct blood-related party. He's the inheritor by law. Correct. It stems from his grandfather. Then, if you sir don't mind, we can use your personal identity to file a lawsuit against them. As long as the court accepts it, then there will be a relational interest between Luo Nan and you sir. And since you're the person in charge of the Rainbow Fund, you're a crucial person in the auction. Then following, Luo Nan's every action would be called into question in regards to the auction. They can be considered personal motivations. I believe that based on these grounds, the school will produce a very sensible decision. It doesn't matter what Luo Nan does, it'll all be useless. Yan Yonghua rubbed his chin upon hearing Lawyer Zhu. That's true. His heart will be filled with anger, yet he'll be powerless. This would be quite excellent. Did he make it through? Lawyer Zhu let out a breath of relief secretly. Lang Ding and the others finally got the chance to greet themselves, but they found themselves to be in awkward positions. They heard these two discussing a plan to target Luo Nan, finding that nothing was taboo for them. It must be known that they were in a public context. There were many people in the restaurant sticking their heads out and looking around because of the unexpected event of before. There were also people coming and going from the private rooms down this corridor who cast curious gazes over. For example, there was a 2-meter-tall giant with a red face from being drunk. He leaned against the wall and rashly turned his head over to look. His large size would make it hard not to be noticed. Yan Yonghua didn't care about this. He was extremely calm right now. I am very sorry for just now. Some private grudges of mine were touched upon, and I somewhat lost myself. I've made everyone humiliated. Not a trace of madness could be seen from Yan Yonghua right now. But the more he was like this, the more people felt how bizarre and unpredictable he was. In the end, it was Lang Ding who mentioned. Let's talk after we enter the room. Let's have a good few drinks as a welcome back for Professor Yen. No matter the thoughts of everyone present, everyone nodded their heads in approval. The group of people immediately gathered around Yan Yonghua and entered into the private room. The atmosphere looked to be extremely warm. In comparison, Luo Nan's family was in a more difficult situation in the large hall. Many people were casting sidelong glances due to the matter that just happened and due to Luo Shuqing's near loss of emotional control later on. The lobby manager even came by to ask if they needed assistance. He probably felt that Luo Nan's family was in a weak place due to the conflict just now. Luo Shuqing was about to call the police, but then her husband restrained her. She just barely suppressed her mood, so Luo Shuqing didn't feel like talking at all. She just wanted to go home immediately. No, go to the hospital. Luo Nan's current state made one far too worried. His head was lowered from beginning to end, and he had yet to speak a word. From Luo Shuqing's understanding of children, she felt that Luo Nan's entire self was situated in an extremely gloomy state. But his emotions were repressed. It seemed that he could explode out at any time. What she was most worried about was this. Would Yan Yonghua's provocation influence Luo Nan's mental condition? Right when Luo Shuqing was restless, Luo Nan opened his mouth and said, "I'm hungry." Then he picked up his chopsticks to dig into the meal placed on the table. This wasn't an especially polite action, but at least he displayed a rational behavior. Luo Shuqing and Mo Haiheng looked at each other. They had no intentions of defying Luo Nan, so they ate their meal in silence. No one was able to feel the taste of this meal. Even the most confused Mo Peng of them all didn't have the mood to play his mobile games. He looked at one, then he looked at another, his face creasing into a frown. The evening meal ended early and the family took the car home. Upon entering the car, upon entering their own private space, Luo Shuqing's repressed emotions back in the public venue exploded out completely. That despicable and shameless mad dog. That father and son just bite people as soon as they see them, having been held back by Quantum Corporation for 5 years. This was the first time in Mo Peng's lifetime that he encounters his mother speak profanities. He watched with gaping eyes. Luo Shuqing wanted to continue speaking, but then Mo Haiheng spoke in a whisper from the front. He fell asleep. Luo Shuqing was a bit startled. She leaned forward slightly and saw Luo Nan leaning against the shotgun seat looking like he was sleeping. The words she had in her stomach were stuffed back inside. This response from Luo Nan was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. The married couple looked at each other face to face once again. They could see the worries in each other's eyes. Luo Nan could only apologize for his uncle and aunt's concern. Actually, he wasn't sleeping, he just wanted things to be quiet for a moment so that he could comb through his thoughts. But now his emotions were boiling from the bottom of his heart. How could he calm down? After being disturbed over and over, he could only turn his thoughts to a different direction. He activated the external neuron and the second layer interface of the drawing software opened on his retina. This interface clearly had a subtle corresponding relationship with his mental plane. The muddy river waters surged with waves to form into a vortex, seeming to display his undulating and surging emotions. 1,000 playing cards also floated in a chaotic mess. And only the 3 believers were relatively stable within the pyramid structure. Luo Nan's gaze cut across Xie Junping and Cat Eyes without pausing. In the end, his gaze fell upon the Wraith sign on the technician level. And now, above the Wraith sign, there sparkled a dazzling red light. Chapter 53 Hunter, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. The red light indicated that the Wraith sign was consuming. It was consuming none other than Luo Nan's rebellious rage. The Wraith sign consumed the negative emotions of humans to grow. It lay within Luo Nan and was restricted by the heavily chained crow. It was impossible to harm Luo Nan's strength. But the intrusion of these intense emotions was tantamount to releasing the restrictions of the Wraith sign by 1 level. The red light gradually faded away and over 100,000 lines sprayed out from the body of the Wraith sign. These lines were similar to the lines from Luo Nan's quick sketches, but they shot out at 10 times the speed to form a complicated and malevolent structure in an instant. 6 eyes were laid in columns, each with different colors. 8 claws extended from the side, fusing with a human body. This ugly and demonic form was none other than the human-faced arachnid. When the image finished forming, Luo Nan's agitation was already on the verge of exploding on the mental plane. The human-faced arachnid unleashed its greed and Luo Nan's mind indulged with it. Heaven and earth overturned in an instant. Luo Nan's consciousness was suddenly separated from the car. The shackles on his mental senses were cast off, and they expanded in all directions to the limits. Luo Nan's soul had come out of his body in this moment. And his main body, which was still carried by car, went rushing far away. Only his soul remained behind in this spot to monopolize this empty level of space. Luo Nan felt no sense of desolation. This was because the range of his mental senses had expanded 1,000-fold in an instant. The convergence of the brilliant lights. The intertwining and rushing flow of cars. The numerous lives all tangled together restlessly. An incomprehensible and wonderful scene was formed in this moment, bombarding against Luo Nan's heart. Roar! Luo Nan cast off all his misgivings, restrictions, and troubles. He ignored the bustling convergence of the logic that was native to every living being. He just followed the most direct and most violent emotions in his heart to face the sky with a long howl. On his soul body, the heavily chained crow unleashed its crackling cry and was moving around endlessly. And in front of the chains was the malevolent and ugly human-faced arachnid. It felt Luo Nan's violent emotions and it also faced the sky with a howl, echoing with Luo Nan. The forces of the two entwined together to form a rushing surge of psychic waves. The waves spread rapidly out in all directions. This magnificent city seemed to slightly freeze in this instant, then its normal operations were restored, it did not appear to have been influenced. But over 100 crows, who had already returned to their nests, flew out in surprise. This caught the attention of the pedestrians coming and going in the residents nearby, bringing them feelings of restlessness. These intelligent birds seemed to have psychic senses that exceeded that of ordinary people. They had felt the restless assault from the air, and it made it hard for them to calm down and return to their nests. His soul finished venting with its howl, allowing Luo Nan to calm down. At least the logic of his thought process could return to a normal operation. Gone was the stimulation from hormones since he was in his soul form. The effects on his mood were brought down. He was able to ignore the deep malice of Yan Yonghua. He was able to grit his teeth for now and forget the mockery and humiliation that Yan Yonghua pierced him with. It was only through this turbid flow of emotions, which had obstructed his rationality, that he was able to grasp that small piece of information. He saw me when I was a fetus. He was there when the wilderness laboratory went into turmoil. He was right at the scene. But this was separated by only 2 years of time from Yen Hong's report to the authorities and shameless plagiarizing. The underlying context that was revealed layer by layer allowed Luo Nan to get closer to the facts of what happened back then. Luo Yuandao's research in the wilderness could be approximately divided into 3 stages. First, Luo Yuandao traveled all across the world from after the Third War until the middle 60s, living without a fixed residence. Then was the most stable research period. This lasted all the way until the end of the 70s. He had accomplished the most within these near 15 years. And starting from the year 79, problems occurred with his grandfather's mind. Then there was also the turmoil that happened in his grandfather's laboratory base. Bu Qingwen had died, and all work on research had fallen to a halt. The entire family returned to the city. From Yan Yonghua's age, it was very likely that Yan Yonghua joined during the end of the research stage or perhaps right before the upheaval. This was a very subtle point in time. He should have already been prepared back then. And so, Yan Yonghua had to be the insider, and perhaps, he was also a participant. It has to be. There were no tracks to Yan Hong, but his son had appeared. So was the father still far away. Luo Nan's soul was submerged in the city lights when a feeling inexplicably leaped out from his heart. This feeling gradually grew clear. So, I actually still have the chance for revenge. A vain and empty struggle for honor was bound to be a dry and tedious path. But before tonight, Luo Nan had no other option. But now, the situation had changed. Luo Nan suddenly broke into laughter, a laughter of pure emotional joy. This was yet another subtle connection to his main body. His main body was far away in the SUV, separated from his soul by over 10 kilometers. But there had always been the psychic aura of senses that remained from beginning to end. As long as these senses were not severed, as long as he hadn't reached past his limits, he would still be able to achieve a few minute interactions. This information wasn't baseless. Luo Nan looked at the human-faced arachnid controlled by the chains. This vicious and ugly darksider life form kept its obedience constantly. Yet there was an unending flow of energy that contained some information and came transmitting over. This information combined with the implementation and practice that Luo Nan had personally performed to give Luo Nan a new conclusion. Luo Nan's central thoughts gradually grew clear. It would have been impossible to achieve his current level of an out-of-body state. The method of expelling his soul out by force was the same as scattering the soul to be condemned to death. He was able to maintain this state due to the human-faced arachnid's rashness in pulling him out and the support from the energy transfer. But ultimately, it was still the heavily chained crow of the self format that had terrified and subdued this darksider life form, allowing for this wonderful setup to materialize. This sort of situation was just like from folklore. He was like a demon tamer or summoner using evil forces to call and enslave a demon. This allowed Luo Nan's thoughts to come to an understanding. The self-format represented control. To use one's own strength for life and death fighting would be quite stupid. The most proper choice would be to tap more into the capabilities and powers of the summoned creature that was the human-faced arachnid. What a pity. Right now he barely had a summoned creature. This was just the wraith sign transformed into a clone of the human-faced arachnid. It would be hard to display its powerful strength. But he could only make do for now. Luo Nan's mind arrived at a decision. His soul body floated onto the back of human-faced arachnid. The demon slave beneath him rose up without a sound and locked onto a direction. Then it leaped through the empty air. A distance of over 100 meters was covered in a flash. This was far faster than when he was on the warship. Luo Nan's mind became free. He was just about to diligently experience this sensation, but then his heart stirred and he was immediately met with a sheet of darkness. The flapping of wings came from low in the sky, crying with caw-caws. It was a very large crow. It came from behind but didn't approach closer once it had reached a certain spot. It just flew spiraling around. It gave off the feeling of being bewildered. Inc. 1. Luo Nan's mental senses enveloped across and in the end, he was able to confirm that this was none other than the crow pet he used to practice hypnotism on. Luo Nan observed the surrounding area in greater detail. And sure enough, it was quite familiar. His family had been going back to the city, so they just passed the River Wu district. It wasn't that far to the Blue Bay community. The howl of his soul just now had actually startled Inc. into action. It had heard the call of its master, so it had flown here in a hurry. 1. Inc. Inc. was first seen in Chapter 1 delivering a test tube to Luo Nan. Chapter 54. Metal Bug, Part. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 54. Metal Bug, Part 1/2. It said that the intelligence of crows exceeded that of a 7-year-old child. It was unknown whether it was due to being gifted or due to the result of being subjected to the frequent hypnotism, but Inc's intelligence clearly exceeded that of its species. Its intuition and reactions were also excellent. It spiraled for several rotations without seeing a trace of any person, then it descended down to a protrusion from a large skyscraper to look in all directions and caw over and over. Clearly, it was using its usual methods to get Luo Nan's attention. Luo Nan's soul body was about 700 meters away at this moment. He saw how Ink was acting, so he stirred telepathically. The heavily chained crow crackled with its call and psychic waves clustered together to be launched towards Ink. This was originally just an experiment, but Ink was clearly quivering. The feathers of its body raised straight up and then it immediately twisted its head. It couldn't see anything in the darkness, but it still flew up after a moment's hesitation. It flew over to the location of Luo Nan's soul body. When it came here, it began to spiral in a glide. It really did seem to be able to feel Luo Nan's existence. Good boy. Luo Nan was quite happy and he tried to use this completely new method to communicating with Ink. And sure enough, the results were several times better than just using pure hypnotism. Most especially was the feedback he received from Ink, it was more direct and clear. There was a great psychic connection. The 6 otherworldly eyes of the human-faced arachnid adjusted their views. It seemed to be paying attention to the newly arrived companion. Of course, the human-faced arachnid intrinsically didn't have self-awareness. This was only an effect from the bidirectional relationship with Luo Nan. Luo Nan felt that he was just like a sorcerer from ancient times. The heavily chained crow was his artifact. It coiled around his soul body like a giant python. The human-faced arachnid was his summoned demon and Ink was his spirit animal that he had tamed. His strength really did manifest itself through this sort of method. Time was of the essence. Luo Nan shouldn't be spending too much time tarrying with Ink. But then a subtle stimulation was sent to him right when he was about to let Ink go home. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment, but soon he was able to differentiate that the stimulation came from the hex ear. The utility of this micro-device was inconceivable. It had detected a lack of response from Luo Nan's main body, then it captured the subtle senses of the body soul and transformed information into psychic waves that were even purer. The information crossed several tens of kilometers of distance through the frequency of Luo Nan's senses to accurately enter Luo Nan's mental plane. The information that came was a chat request, and along with it came a default notification from the psychic wave network. Do you want to start the long-distance remote sensing function? If this function didn't activate due to skipping the dialogue, the hexaear would assume that the owner was in a deep sleep state. This was truly an inconceivable invention. Luo Nan was forced to pay his respects to the legendary President Ouyang. The inventor had certainly given ample consideration towards souls in body states and had implemented this function. Octopus Bro had described President Ouyang's excellent achievements in the realm of the mentally enhanced. From the hexaear, Luo Nan could see that there was quite the basis behind Octopus Bro's words. Luo Nan pondered only a moment before choosing to start the function. This was because he had seen who had requested the call. It was Crag Burst. Crag Burst, a fellow member of the Wilderness Explorers Society, and Luo Nan were at the same restaurant just then. They didn't meet face to face during that time though. Luo Nan guessed that Crag Burst wanted to meet up or something. But right now he really wasn't in the mood. Anyway, he wanted to confirm the current situation within the restaurant. The remote sensing function was activated and the information coming from Crag Burst was driven via psychic waves to collide with Luo Nan in the air. Luo Nan, who was in soul form, was inexplicably dazzled. This was a totally different experience than when he was in his normal state. In the instant he was absent-minded, Crag Burst's rough and somewhat lispy voice sounded forth. It looked like he commonly used the hexaear as a telephone. Mr. Luo, did you leave? Luo Nan was baffled about Crag Burst's certainty of this. Could it be that Crag Burst had gone to the hall in search of him? Luo Nan paused, then he replied with an answer that wasn't really a lie. Yes. I'm with my family. Crag Burst let out a laugh. So you really left just like that? How weak. You can't even make your way back to the field. Luckily, I drank less alcohol than usual. I'll come over and find you. Luo Nan was speechless for some time. Indeed, good deeds don't see the light of day while misdeeds travel 1,000 miles. One Luo Nan's miserable appearance in the restaurant would soon be widely spread within the society. Crag Burst was a clever man. His thought process was very straightforward. He probably felt that Luo Nan had tossed away his honor and wanted to retrieve it later on. Crag Burst was really quite willing to help out. Unfortunately, Luo Nan's current state would bound to make it difficult for Crag Burst to lend Luo Nan some strength. Wait. Luo Nan stared fixed at ink spiraling around in the air. An idea suddenly sprouted in his mind. Is your get together over? I've stopped drinking. Of course everyone left. Hey. What are you thinking? Crag Burst clearly wanted to watch the world burn. Luo Nan would have had a headache towards people like this before, but now, he wanted none other than Crag Burst. I'll need some time to get there. Did those people leave yet? It seems like they're moving along rather quickly. If you're slow for a moment, you'll lose your chance. Oh crap. They came out. Even meals during work don't go that fast. Did the negotiations between the Rainbow Fund and the Construction Society go smoothly, or did they part on bad terms? Luo Nan was disinclined to spend time thinking about this question. He gave a glance to ink and he spoke to Crag Burst. Help me keep an eye on them. Share me their location. Maintain contact. I'm making my way over to meet up with you. You want me to tail them? This isn't a problem, but are you sure you can make it back in time? You don't need me to stall for time or something. You don't need to for now. Alright then. If you need me to, just let me know. My Tiger Burst has yet to be put to use. Much thanks. Luo Nan did not say much more to this heavy hitter who was eager to get in on the action. Luo Nan hung up the phone and put his attention once more onto the airborne ink. Ink appeared to have felt Luo Nan's gaze, and it let out two coarse caws. Its feathers quivered and it glided even more cheerfully within the blurred fog. A crackling cry rang forth. The heavily chained crow's movements increased its speed from upon Luo Nan's sole body. The human-faced arachnid also experienced this change. Its devilish and ugly head reared up. Its 6 eyes flickered. And it let out a hiss that only existed on the mental plane. There wasn't truly nighttime in Xia City. All sorts of neon lights constructed a spattered sky exclusive to night. The beat of revelry mixed everywhere, permeating into the hearts of every roaming person. Crag Burst opened his car window and a torrent of heavy metal music came blasting out along with surging lyrics and loud roars. Crag Burst completely ignored the gazes cast at him from the flow of traffic. Smash the chest open. Embrace the soft flesh and blood. Rah. 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 Probably no one would expect that this fellow was doing a shadowing operation. Crag Burst didn't have a conscientious mind. He just felt that everything was okay as long as the target's vehicle was within his sights. Rip apart the throat. Kiss. OD*MN. A bold and fierce crow had dangerously swept over to the top of his car, brushing against the top of the cars in front. While it was true that this was quite the thrilling stimulation, the scene had disrupted the tempo of his music. And so he reached his hand out of the window and pointed towards the sky. Just go die already. Experience the anger that stems from within me. Rah. 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 Then right at this time came news of Luo Nan through the hexaear. Maintain speed of the car. I have arrived. The voice had yet to finish speaking when a jet-black shadow came ramming in through the back window. 2 feathers could be seen drifting down. 1. Crag Burst witnessing the incident between Luo Nan and Yan Yonghua in the restaurant. In chapter 53.1, there was the following line. For example, there was a 2-meter-tall giant with a red face from being drunk. He leaned against the wall and rashly turned his head over to look. His large size would make it hard not to be noticed. Chapter 54. Metal Bug, Part 2 of 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey hey hey. Crag Burst stared blankly at this huge and sturdy crow. It had charged in through the car window and had crashed into the back of the thick leather chair. Then it had fallen head first to drop onto the back row of seats. The two feathers, which had been scraped off, floated within the breeze at the back of the car. They twirled a bit before being blown back out the window. But the unexpected guest had remained behind in the end. Mr. Luo. Yes. It's me. The crow straightened itself and cawed twice with a sound that was sandy and coarse to the ears. It matched quite well with the heavy metal that was blasting in the car. Of course, real responses would come from the hexeer. It was beyond Crag Burst's expectations. Crag Burst never thought that the one who had arrived would be in this form. He overlooked how the sharp claws of the crow had already scratched through the exterior of the leather seat. His eyes were bulging wide as he sized up the crow up and down. The mentally enhanced do have many skills. Would you be a summoner? Do you share senses with this bird? Yes. Things are more or less like you say. Since Crag Burst had spoken this much, Luo Nan took the chance to acknowledge this. He was able to avoid looking for other reasons that may be riddled with holes. Oh hey. Looks like a lot of people are underestimating you. To be able to psychically connect to a living being, share senses. This soul-splitting is a high-level skill. There are no gifted on that level, and even awakened would find it hard to do it with finesse. Most instances are quite vulgar. Crag Burst frowned. He was a musclehead, so he detested the indirect methods of using separate manifested bodies to do work. Luo Nan still hadn't awakened though and was seriously skinny like a toothpick. It was already quite decent of Luo Nan to be able to make use of this method. Most praiseworthy of all was Luo Nan's attitude of seeking revenge for even the smallest grievance before the night's end. Ink hopped twice atop the leather seats at this time. It spread its wings, seeking to fly again. Tiger Burst, a military-modified jeep, contained a lot of space inside. It had to have been, otherwise, the heavy-weight Crag Burst would never have fit inside. But for Ink, with its length of 70 centimeters and a wingspan of 1 meter, it was still a bit difficult to flap its wings. Ink flapped twice but was unable to produce sufficient force. Crag Burst watched with cheerful laughter. He extended his hand over, let Ink grab on tight, and released Ink onto the central console. Here. The view here is the best. Do you see them yet? They're ahead of us by 2 cars. It's the blue van. Ink's talons hooked onto the edge of the control console to stand rather quite stably. Its jet black eyes stared fixed at the target vehicle in front. It watched with extreme concentration. How about it? Need me to do something? Crag Burst wanted to have some fun from the very beginning. No. Not for now. Luo Nan replied simply. Crag Burst was a bit disappointed. Now he couldn't really scream his song, so he had turned bored. He ended up chatting randomly. I originally thought that you were going to ask Vice President He to help out and that you were going to ask Zhou Hu for help before you left. So you really didn't contact them, but why do I need to find Sister He? Luo Nan was somewhat speechless. Could it be that he gave off the feeling of being the sort of person that came running for help when being bullied? Whatever. He Yuan wasn't his parent. In any case, this military woman was the type to do official business using official principles. She would come to look down upon Luo Nan if he were to ask her for help with personal affairs. This is my personal matter. I won't rely on other people for help. Brother Crag Burst. I thank you very much for tailing them for so long. Leave the rest to me then. What? You're just going to kick me aside? Crag Burst was displeased. It looks like you're not going to make your move tonight based on your appearance. Yes. This involves a complicated legal case that happened over 10 years ago. I want to gain a deep understanding. My primary goal is to investigate. Crag Burst was still unwilling to give up. Are you sure? Your bird spent all its effort to fly its way over here. Can it catch up to their car? The flying speed of the Corvus Frigiligus was just ordinary among birds. Even though Ink had been trained by Luo Nan, giving it a better constitution, its speed was only about 70 km per hour. It was not very likely for Ink to catch up to the car through the smooth and precise flow of traffic if no traffic jams appear. The thing was that Luo Nan never expected Ink to be able to do such a thing. He let Ink come over to show off in front of Crag Burst's eyes. He just wanted to find an excuse is all. His true task of reconnaissance would still be reliant on other methods. Luo Nan's sole body had been floating above the flow of traffic while he was chatting with Crag Burst. He avoided doing close-distance contact with the awakened Crag Burst and advanced forward in sync with the flow of cars. His senses, which exceeded a range of 500 meters, had already enveloped the interior of the target's blue van. A penetrating scan had already swept across twice. However, this low-key blue van had an exterior material that seemed to be quite complicated. Every time Luo Nan tried scanning, interference would always appear, making it hard for Luo Nan to ascertain the number of people and the positions of people inside. With 2 attempted instances resulting in failure, Luo Nan's heart raised in vigilance. The car was still running very smoothly. It seemed that his reconnaissance had been far too direct. The warning system within the van had been triggered at this time. It didn't make a noise but instead illuminated with a dazzling red light. The dark-skinned bodyguard, who sat in the driver's spot, had his eyes turned thoroughly cold. His gaze swept outside the window. Darksider life form. Yan Yonghua, who had been resting with closed eyes, slowly opened his eyes. But then the warning light suddenly went out at this time. Yan Yonghua couldn't help muttering to himself. Is it possible that we've entered the territory of the human-faced arachnid? Or is it that we've caught the interest of some powerful body soul? We've been tailed. The dark-skinned bodyguard suddenly said these words and activated the projector equipment at this time. The real-time satellite video of the surrounding area appeared. The car's AI assimilated the relevant video with the van to automatically combine them together. Its high-speed analysis soon displayed a few suspicious targets. The most probable target was marked by an eye-catching red circle. It was an eye-catching and domineering military-altered Tiger Burst. Its volume was like a small armored car. It could really speed off in the wilderness with its rough 4 wheels. It appeared out of harmony within the bustling city. This car was always following us ever since we left the restaurant. And the monitoring system shows that someone inside the car had mentioned the words, blue van. The military. This kind of aggressive tailing style really did look like something a proud and dauntless soldier would do. But then Yan Yonghua squinted his eyes for careful observation. Through the high-definition picture, he was able to capture a large crow beneath the car's window. It was clearly not an ornament. How interesting. Look deeper into it. Oh, wait. Right now we're near the River Wu district. Yes. Then let's use a different method. Yan Yonghua rubbed his fingers slowly, then he pulled outwards. A fine soft needle was pulled inexplicably out through the skin of his fingertips. The scene was uncanny beyond compare. The soft needle had thick and thin hairs coming out of it, its length was only about 5 centimeters long, and it looked to be a sort of metal material. But in the hands of Yan Yonghua, it was like kneaded flour. He kneaded the soft needle twice, and when he opened his hand up again, the soft needle had turned into a metal beetle the size of a grain of rice as if by magic. The car's window opened and with the snap of Yan Yonghua's fingers, the beetle was ejected out the car. Tell Jack that it's time to upgrade the hardware. If he wants to get a first-rate configuration, then he'll need to work hard. Just go search within the trash of that car then. The blue van's speed remained constant, but the Tiger Burst Jeep had inexplicably dropped in speed as seen on the satellite video feed.